We are gathered here today to celebrate Flower Communion, a uniquely Unitarian Universalist ritual. And we will begin by telling the story of the very first Flower Communion and the beautiful and unique person who brought it to the world. His story begins almost like a fairy tale. Long, long ago, in the last days of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, in a place we now call the Czech Republic, a poor village tailor and his wife lived with their only son. Born on St. Norbert's Day, a religious feast for the Catholic Church, the couple decided to name their child after the saint. Life was not easy for young Norbert and his parents. The little tailor shop made very little money, and not wanting Norbert to be without proper food or education, his father and mother decided, when he was still quite young, to send him to live with his uncle Victor in the great city of Vienna. Like Norbert's parents, Uncle Victor was a tailor, as his father had been, and his father before him, and his father before that. Uncle Victor was also Catholic, like his father, and his father before that, and his father before that. Uncle Victor could not imagine that his nephew would want to be anything else. The agreement was that Norbert would work his way through school while learning the trade in his uncle's tailor shop, and he would attend Mass at the Catholic Church every Sunday while living in Vienna. Now, about the time that Norbert became a teenager, he began to realize that being a tailor wasn't for him. And he also began to realize that he really didn't like going to the church that his uncle insisted that he go to. So he started sneaking off to the Baptist church, where he could sing and ask questions and talk to others about his thoughts of God, and where the service was spoken in his own language instead of Latin. On the day that Norbert finally worked up enough courage to declare that he would be neither a tailor nor Catholic, his uncle Victor became very, very angry, and Norbert was immediately cast out onto the streets with only the clothes on his back. Can you imagine being abandoned and left alone in a big city just for believing differently and imagining a different kind of future for yourself? This was a hard time for Norbert, but he found kindness and help from the people at the Baptist church where he had been attending. They took him in, they raised money, and they sent him off to seminary, where he became the Reverend Norbert Čapek. Now life was much better. Norbert, you see, was a very good preacher. He traveled all over, and people would gather to hear him speak. He founded 12 Baptist churches from Budapest to Ukraine. He met a girl. He fell in love. They had 11 children. But still, there were many obstacles to overcome. As time went on, the more he studied and the more he reflected, Norbert's view about the Bible and God became less and less dogmatic and more liberal. This made people in his church quite angry, and several of them tried to kick him out, remove him from his position. To make matters worse, at this time, Catholicism was the official religion of the empire. Being a Baptist, especially a very popular one that drew lots of people to hear him speak, this made Norbert regarded as very suspicious. The police raided his church on more than one occasion. This would have been tough to endure by himself, but the threats of violence against his family were more than he could tolerate. So in 1915, at the age of 45, Norbert moved with his family to the United States to serve a Baptist church in New Jersey. But just as he no longer had to worry about the threats from without, Norbert began to have more doubts from within. He began to question the beliefs of the Baptist church. Shortly after, he wrote in his diary, "I cannot be a Baptist anymore, even in compromise. The fire of new desires and new worlds is burning inside me." And just like that, Norbert left the Baptist church and began looking for a new spiritual home. So each Sunday, his family would try a different church. Afterwards, they would gather for a meal, and Norbert would ask his children, "What did you learn in Sunday school today?" If he did not like the answers, they never went back. Norbert was looking for a church where his children could be curious, ask questions, and learn to be spiritually free. Then one Sunday, just like many of you, he visited a Unitarian church. And it was just what he was looking for. And he liked what his children were taught. So they went back the next week, and then again, and again, and again, and before they knew it, they were members. The more Norbert learned about the Unitarian faith, the more he realized he had found a place where he truly belonged, a place where his soul could bloom. He enrolled in Meadville Lombard Unitarian Seminary in Chicago, and he graduated just as the First World War was ending. In 1921, the newly ordained Unitarian minister, the Reverend Norbert Chapek, made a big decision. He decided to return to his homeland. No longer part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Czechoslovakia, as it was known then, was a newly created democratic republic, and Norbert had a burning desire to share the good news of Unitarianism with the people there. He packed up his family and moved to the capital city of Prague and started a Unitarian church. The people in Czechoslovakia at the end of the World War I were eager to hear new religious ideas. And as Norbert began to write articles and give talks, people flocked to hear him. In less than 2 years, over 3,000 people were attending his church. It was the largest Unitarian church in the world. Just like our little church, the Prague Unitarian Fellowship brought together people from all different religious backgrounds and walks of life. Norbert soon found that nobody wanted to be reminded of their old churches. Could the minister wear a robe and a collar? No. Could they sing the traditional hymns? Absolutely not. Could prayers be offered? Oh, no. And God forbid if anybody tried to pass the collection plate. But Norbert believed there was a need for symbolism and ritual in religion. If his congregations was going to reject the old ways of doing things, it meant that he needed to create new ways. A walk in the countryside along a meadow filled with wildflowers provided Norbert the inspiration he needed. He wrote, "We have chosen flowers, nature's most tender, common, and beautiful gift, as our symbol and sacrament. A flower is divine. You cannot create it, no matter what effort you make." And here is how he described the new ritual. On that very Sunday, everyone was supposed to bring with him a flower. In the middle of the big hall, there was a suitable table with a big vase where everyone could put his flower. The sight of so many beautiful flowers was wonderful. As I spoke, I put an emphasis on the individual character of each member flower as the foundation of our fellowship. Then I emphasized our common cause, our bringing together as one spiritual community. as brethren. And when they go home, each one is to take a flower just as it comes, without making any distinction of where it came from or who it represents, to confess that we accept each other as brothers and sisters without regard to class or race or distinction, acknowledging everyone as our friend who is human and wants to be good. This ritual, this flower communion, touched the hearts of the people in Prague, and it was repeated each year in the springtime. The wonderful and exciting time for Norbert, when his church was growing and Unitarianism was spreading in Prague and throughout the country, did not last long. Things changed in the world, and by the 1930s, Czechoslovakia was a difficult place to be a Unitarian. In 1939, when Germany invaded, Norbert and his church were again put under surveillance. Secret police watched everything they did and reported back the things he said to the German authorities. Norbert's message of diversity and equity and inclusion did not resonate with the Nazis. In 1941, Norbert and his daughter were arrested for the crime of listening to a foreign radio broadcast. That is right. Seeking truth from a source not approved by the government was a crime. Zora was eventually released, but a year later, Norbert was killed by the Nazis in a place called Dachau. His story did not have a fairy tale ending. Or did it? In some ways, Norbert lives on. Here we are 100 years later, celebrating his flower communion each year, pretty much the way he envisioned it, and sometimes even using the very words that he wrote. The tiny seed of an idea that he released into the world, the idea that we can create our own rituals that celebrate our strength as individuals and our diverse community, that seed has taken root here, and it continues to bloom.